Imagine you're standing on a sidewalk and you witness this horrific car crash right at an intersection.
Oh, wow. Yeah, a highly stressful situation.
Right. And so the police arrive, they take out their notepads, and they ask you, how fast was that red car going when it smashed into the blue one?
Okay, the key word there is smashed.
Exactly. You confidently give them an estimate, you describe the scene, but what you don't realize in that moment is that the single word smashed
Yeah.
just like hacked your brain.
It's terrifying how easily that happens.
It really is. It completely erased your actual visual memory of the event
Right.
and replaced it with a hallucination.
Hmm.
You are now remembering broken glass that never ever actually existed.
Because we all operate under this massive collective illusion about our own minds. We treat human memory like a physical archive.
Right, like the classic videotape myth.
Exactly. You experience something, the brain hits record, and when you need the information later, you just, find the file and hit play.
We crave that binary engineering level precision, don't we? Like when you break your arm and X-ray shows a jagged white line, it's clean, visible truth.
But when we look at cognitive neuroscience and psychology, that X-ray machine just shatters.
Which is exactly why we are taking a deep dive into memory today. We really need to unpack why this biological glitch happens.
And, the most important thing for you to understand right off the bat is that the failures of our memory aren't just random bugs in your mental software. They are fundamental features.
Features, not bugs.
Yeah, necessary features of the human brain.
Mm.
Whether you're studying for an exam or just trying to remember where you put your keys, understanding how your mind reconstructs reality is crucial.
Especially in a world that is just constantly bombarding you with information overload.
Right. Your brain is not a passive filing cabinet. It is an active, really ruthless editor. To keep up with the sheer volume of data, it relies on these pre-existing blueprints we call schemas.
Schivas. Okay, so if memory isn't a video recording, the brain is actively building it.
Yes, from mental frameworks built from everything you've ever experienced. They allow your mind to predict what should happen in a room or, in a crisis.
I always think about it like this. The brain is fundamentally lazy,
Hmm.
or, well, highly efficient, I guess.
Efficient is definitely the kinder word for it.
Right, because it takes way too much caloric energy to encode every single novel detail of a new experience. Think of schemas like the predictive text algorithm on your phone.
No, that's a brilliant analogy.
Yeah, your brain doesn't want to type out reality from scratch every time, so it just autofills the blanks based on what it expects to be there.
And what's fascinating here is that this predictive autofill is incredibly powerful. We see its mechanics perfectly illustrated in a classic psychological experiment by Bartlett.
Oh, the War of the Ghosts study, right?
That's the one. Participants were asked to read a Native American folktale, which had a lot of supernatural elements and culturally specific logic to it.
Stuff that wouldn't make sense to an early 20th century British person.
Precisely. And then they had to recount it to the next person, much like the game telephone.
And as the story moved down the line, it didn't just get shorter. People actively mutated the plot.
They did. The actual ghosts were just dropped entirely.
Yeah, and the spiritual motivations for a character refusing to go to battle were magically transformed into, he didn't go because he hadn't told his parents.
Right, because their brains encountered a cultural anomaly that didn't fit their worldview. So the brain just rewrote the story to make it fit a comfortable, familiar schema.
It's wild. The brain just casually invents a new reality to save energy.
Bartlett called this the effort after meaning. The mind, it just cannot tolerate a vacuum of logic. It contorts unfamiliar data until it makes sense.
But this cognitive editing process has a much darker manifestation too, especially when we look at societal stereotypes.
Absolutely. The Allport and Postman study is a landmark example of this. They showed participants an image of two men arguing on a subway train.
And just to set the scene, one was a white man holding a razor, and the other was an unarmed black man.
Exactly. And later, when asked to describe the image from memory, a shocking number of participants confidently reported that the black man was the one wielding the razor.
The brain literally hallucinated a weapon into an unarmed man's hand because the visual reality contradicted a prejudiced schema.
Yeah, rather than bringing the cognitive energy to update their worldview, their visual processing center simply altered the evidence to fit the stereotype.
That is deeply unsettling.
It is. Daniel Schachter, a leading memory researcher, categorizes these deeply ingrained flaws into what he calls the seven sins of memory.
Okay, let's unpack those.
Well, with schemas, we're observing two specific sins. First is transience, which is the rapid deterioration of specific verbatim details over time.
So just forgetting the exact facts.
Right. And the second is bias, where our current beliefs, feelings, and worldview reach back in time and actively distort the original encoding.
Okay, so if the brain is already playing fast and loose with the details, constantly autofilling the gaps, it creates a massive
A
vulnerability.
huge one, yes.
Because if someone comes along and hands our brain a fake detail that just sounds plausible, the brain accepts it. Which brings us back to that car crash hallucination.
Yes, the groundbreaking work of Elizabeth Loftus in the 1970s. She really proved the misinformation effect.
By showing participants a video of a traffic accident, right?
Exactly. Afterward, she asked them questions, but she subtly manipulated the verbs. Some were asked how fast the cars were going when they hit each other.
And others were asked how fast they were going when they smashed.
And the participants who heard smashed estimated significantly faster speeds. But the wild part is what happened weeks later.
They falsely remembered seeing broken glass at the scene. And there was no broken glass in the video at all.
None. In other variations, Loftus got people to swear they saw a yield sign instead of a stop sign, simply by embedding a casual written mention of a yield sign in a questionnaire.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. Wait, so just asking a question a certain way actually rewrites the memory?
It's hotly debated in the scientific community. There are two leading models trying to explain the actual mechanism inside the brain. Memory impairment versus memory blending.
Okay, what's the difference?
Memory impairment argues that the original memory trace, say the stop sign, is literally overwritten and destroyed by the new information. The yield sign completely replaces it.
I gotta say, I struggle to buy the idea that the memory is completely permanently gone. Surely the original visual is still in the brain somewhere, just temporarily buried.
You're not alone in thinking that. That is the exact counter-argument presented by the memory blending theory.
Okay, so what does blending suggest?
It posits that the original information and the new suggestion fuse together, creating this hybrid mental image. But functionally, whether it's destroyed or mixed, the pure memory is inaccessible.
Huh.
Schachter classifies this as the sin of suggestibility. If an external source provides a definitive, authoritative statement about the past, the mind just incorporates it as its own lived reality.
And it scales up to terrifying proportions, doesn't it? We aren't just talking about stop signs here.
No, not at all. Have you looked at the research on rich false memories?
Yes, the phenomenon where you can implant entirely fabricated, highly emotional traumas into someone's mind, like getting lost in a shopping mall as a kid.
Exactly. Researchers successfully convinced adults of this using a familial informant false narrative.
Basically, they got the participants' older sibling to play along, right? Like, oh yeah, remember when you got lost at Sears and that security guard found you?
And the brain accepts this because of a failure in a cognitive checkpoint called discrepancy detection.
Discrepancy detection.
Yeah, when the false information is presented, if you don't immediately flag it as a lie, your brain just absorbs it. And time delay exacerbates this.
Right, because if weeks have passed, your verbatim memory is weak, making discrepancy detection almost impossible.
But there is a fascinating remedy in the literature. Presenting post-event information as questions rather than definitive statements can actually eliminate the misinformation effect.
Oh wait, really?
Yeah. The brain processes a question analytically, keeping its guard up, but it absorbs a statement as just raw data.
So what does this all mean? The root cause of why the brain so easily accepts this fake data is incredibly simple. We lose the metadata.
The metadata, I like that framing.
It's like downloading a file onto your computer but losing all the tags. You have the information, but you have absolutely no idea if you got it from a secure website or a sketchy form.
That is a perfect transition to source monitoring errors. To understand this mechanical failure, we divide memory into three phases: encoding, retrieval, and attribution.
Encoding is the initial perception, retrieval is accessing the file, so attribution is assigning that file to its correct origin.
Exactly. And a source monitoring error is a catastrophic failure in that attribution stage.
I do this constantly, I swear. I'll spend 20 minutes arguing with my spouse about something they said, only to realize I was remembering a deep dive I listened to while doing the dishes.
Oh, we all do it.
Or I'll confidently quote a social media post as a first-hand experience. I have the data, but the context tag is completely gone.
Schechter calls this the sin of misattribution, and it is heavily driven by familiarity. When a concept feels familiar, the brain assumes it must be true.
even if the familiarity comes from a totally different context.
Right. And in high-stakes environments, this glitch is devastating. Take the Oklahoma City bombing investigation.
Oh, the John Doe 2 situation.
Yes, a witness confidently remembered two men renting the suspect's van. One perfectly matched the actual bomber.
But the other description triggered a massive manhunt for an accomplice who didn't even exist.
Exactly. The witness had flawlessly remembered the face of an innocent man who had rented a completely different van at that exact same shop the very next day.
Because the innocent man's face was familiar within the context of the rental shop, the brain just glued his face into the memory of the bomber.
It's a reality monitoring failure. Neurologically, imagining an event and actually perceiving it activate incredibly similar neural pathways.
So when an imagined scenario overlaps with reality, we lose the source tag.
Yes, the brain literally cannot distinguish between a real memory and a vivid hallucination.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because I can accept that I forget where I heard a random fact, sure, but I refuse to believe this applies to trauma.
Ah, you're talking about flashbulb memories.
Exactly, those massive, tragic events. I vividly remember exactly where I was during 9/11 or when I heard about the Challenger disaster. It feels completely real, like a high-definition photograph.
I know it feels that way, but the confidence you feel is actually an illusion generated by your amygdala.
Wait, how can my own brain's emotional response be the exact thing betraying my memory?
Because the research consistently demonstrates that while confidence in traumatic memories remains perfectly high over decades, the actual accuracy of the details degrades at the exact same rate as your memory of what you ate for breakfast last Tuesday.
That is mind-blowing, and the research from Ithaca College, Bissett Simons, really proved this right.
Yes, she ran studies proving that emotion fundamentally degrades memory reliability. She showed participants a series of photographs, some neutral, some highly distressing.
And later, when shown a mixed batch of old and new photos, the emotion actually increased the rate at which participants falsely identified new, unseen negative pictures as ones they had viewed earlier.
But Bissett Simons identified a crucial nuance. This massive increase in false memories only occurred with images of people, not objects.
It's an empathy bias.
Exactly. When you look at an image of a person suffering, your brain's emotional resonance goes into overdrive. You connect deeply with the distress.
And that overwhelming emotional response completely short-circuits your brain's ability to record the precise physical details. The brain gets so obsessed with the feeling that it stops recording the facts.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, there's a brilliant psychological trick that proves this called the Diess-Roediger-McDermott paradigm, or the DRM.
Oh, I love this one. Okay, if I read you a list of words right now: bed, dream, night, blanket, snore.
Your brain is already forcing the word sleep into your mind.
Right. If I ask you 10 minutes from now, you will swear under oath that I said the word sleep.
The DRM paradigm exposes the mechanics of a fuzzy trace theory. When you hear that list, your brain encodes two parallel memory traces.
The verbatim trace and the gist trace.
Exactly. The verbatim trace records the exact phonetic words. The gist trace records the semantic meaning things related to sleeping.
And storing verbatim data is biologically expensive, so those traces decay rapidly.
Within minutes, you are relying entirely on the gist trace, which naturally pulls in that critical lore word, sleep.
And there is a hardwired anatomical reason for this shift from facts to feelings, isn't there?
There is. True visual memory relies on the occipital cortex at the back of the brain. But the moment you introduce intense emotion, the amygdala, the brain's emotional alarm bell, takes over.
And it modulates the hippocampo-neocortical circuits.
Right. Think of the hippocampus as the brain's meticulous filing clerk, trying to carefully organize verbatim details.
But the amygdala just drowns the clerk out. The brain decides the emotional gist is more important for survival than precise visual details.
Sacrificing accuracy for emotional resonance.
So if our hardware is built to prioritize gist over reality, who is vulnerable? Are some people walking around with naturally bulletproof memories?
Well, susceptibility to the misinformation effect varies based on a really fascinating matrix of traits. Age is a primary factor.
Preschool children are incredibly suggestible, obviously,
Yes, their executive functioning is still developing. And for older adults, the aging process often impacts the medial temporal lobe, which handles associative binding.
which makes them more prone to source monitoring errors, though I know strong baseline cognitive capacity can mitigate that.
It can. But the personality factors are where it gets truly wild.
Yes. Think about your own traits as you listen to this. Because if you are an introvert who relies on intuition, you are actually significantly more likely to accept false information than an extroverted, sensory-focused person.
Introverts tend to have lower baseline confidence in their own outward memory of social events, making them quicker to yield to an external suggestion.
And what about imagery ability? If you can close your eyes and visualize an apple in photorealistic 4K, you'd think your memory is better, right?
You would think so, but you are actually at a distinct disadvantage.
Wait, really?
Yeah, because when given a false detail, you imagine it so vividly that your reality monitoring hardware gets overwhelmed. Your brain tags the high-definition mental image as a real lived experience.
Oh, wow. That makes so much sense. Conversely, individuals with high working memory capacity are highly resistant to misinformation.
They have the cognitive RAM to hold the original memory and the false suggestion simultaneously, compare them, and reject the anomaly.
State of mind plays a huge role too, right? Alcohol, acute social stress, hypnosis, they all aggressively lower the brain's discrepancy detection threshold.
They do, but the most universal everyday vulnerability comes down to how we sleep. And the scientific literature here presents an incredible paradox.
Yes, the sleep debate.
What stands out to you about how your own sleep habits might be quietly rewriting your reality while you rest? Because sleep is the ultimate cognitive catch-22.
On one hand, sleep is the ideal environment for memory consolidation.
Right. As you sleep, the brain transfers information from the short-term storage of the hippocampus into the long-term storage of the neocortex. It strengthens the signal.
But simultaneously, during certain sleep cycles, the brain actively generalizes memory traces to extract rules and concepts.
Which means, as the brain is pruning away the verbatim details to save the gist, it creates a window of extreme vulnerability.
So a sleep cycle can actually increase your susceptibility to misinformation. You could permanently weave a lie into the fabric of a real memory while you dream.
Exactly. Yet if you try to avoid that by depriving yourself of sleep, the lack of rest severely impairs your working memory and retrieval networks.
You become equally, if not more, suggestible because you lack the resources to fend off false narratives.
Whether you sleep deeply or pull an all-nighter, the neurobiological editing room never closes.
It never closes. We started this deep dive by tearing down the videotape myth. We've seen how our brains deploy schemas to autofill our reality, prioritizing energy efficiency over truth.
And we mapped how a single leading question can rewrite your visual cortex.
And how our inability to track metadata leads to innocent people being placed at the scene of a crime. We've even uncovered the terrifying reality that our own empathy actively degrades our most deeply held traumatic memories.
The stakes of this architecture go far beyond misplacing your keys. These cognitive reconstructive errors are the foundation of our legal system's greatest flaws.
Like eyewitness testimony.
Exactly. It's routinely treated as golden, objective truth by juries, yet it is profoundly vulnerable to source misattribution and suggestibility. Understanding that human memory is an evolving, highly corruptible draft is really the only way to safeguard justice.
Every single time you access a memory, you aren't just reading it, you are opening it in edit mode. It is constantly being updated, overwritten, and influenced by your current emotional state. It's much like a live Wikipedia page.
A very fragile Wikipedia page.
Right. And if that's the biological reality of our minds, I want to leave you with this final thought to mull over. How much of your core identity, your personality, and the grand narrative of your life story is built in a foundation of events that never actually happened the way you remember them?